Something happened at Brown's practice on Tuesday. And it wasn't a rumor, a leak, or a cryptic tweet. It was a bomb dropping in real time on camera, in front of reporters, teammates, and anyone within earshot. SHEDEUR Sanders spoke. 4 words, clear as day. "I can't stay here anymore." No dramatic walkout, no shouting match, just calm, focused conviction. It wasn't a tantrum. It was a line in the sand. The look in his eyes, final. The tone, controlled but unshakable. There was no second guessing, no coded message for insiders to decode. This wasn't a passive-aggressive post on Instagram. This was a top-tier athlete speaking truth to dysfunction out loud, for the world to hear. And just like that, the Browns' quarterback room exploded into a full-blown crisis. One practice, one statement, and possibly the end of SHEDEUR Sanders' time in Cleveland. But how did it come to this? How does a 5th-round pick outperform everyone in camp, only to be buried on the depth chart? And who's really pulling the strings inside the Browns organization? Because according to insiders, this storm's been building for weeks. And what happened next didn't just put Cleveland on blast, it forced the entire NFL to stop and stare. When SHEDEUR Sanders first arrived in Cleveland, he did exactly what every franchise claims they want from a young quarterback. He showed up, locked in, and went to war in silence. No ego, no complaints. Just relentless preparation, mental sharpness, and physical dominance. If you actually paid attention at camp, one thing was obvious from day one. This kid wasn't just good, he was the best quarterback on the field. And yet, not a single first-team rep. None. Not even a look. From the start of training camp, Sanders was sharper, quicker, and more efficient than anyone else in the building. His footwork was crisp, his reads were lightning fast, and his throws? Tight spirals hitting receivers in stride, even under pressure. Word around the facility was simple. This guy is surgical, especially when stacked up against Dillon Gabriel, the Browns' 3rd-round pick and so-called future backup. While Sanders was slicing up red zone defenses in practice with veteran-level poise, Gabriel was struggling with the basics, missing checkdowns, panicking in the pocket, and turning the ball over more than a few times. If you asked the players, the difference was night and day. But if you looked at the reps, Kevin Stefanski wasn't seeing it. Or worse, he was ignoring it. That's when the cracks started showing. Players began whispering. Media insiders heard what fans didn't, that the coaching staff had already made their choice before camp even began. Multiple reports now suggest that Stefanski had locked in Gabriel as the heir apparent no matter what played out during practice. It wasn't a competition, it was a coronation. Sanders was never given a real shot. And here's where things get uncomfortable. Because this wasn't about talent, it was about control. Teams love clean narratives. Draft pick rises, carries clipboard for a year or two, then eventually earns his role. But when an outlier like Sanders shows up and wrecks that script, the system resists. For a front office that spent a 3rd-rounder on Gabriel, promoting Sanders would have meant admitting they got it wrong. And in a league driven by egos and reputation, that's something many coaches simply won't do. But the locker room knows better. Vets notice who's balling and who's fumbling. Quiet conversations between players started shifting. Neutral teammates began siding with Sanders privately at first, but more boldly with each passing practice. And this isn't coming from fringe guys, it's coming from leaders inside the room. There's a reason respect flows to Sanders. He's earned it with performance, not politics. And when that kind of player gets ignored, tension builds. Fast. By the time Sanders made his public statement, the situation in Cleveland wasn't just fragile, it was broken. What looked like a typical depth chart issue from the outside was, on the inside, a full-blown breakdown in trust, communication, and leadership. And remember, this isn't some diva QB demanding spotlight. This is a 5th-round pick who outperformed expectations, stayed professional, and quietly earned the belief of a locker room, only to be iced out by a coaching staff too stubborn to reconsider. But while Cleveland ignored their own rising star, someone else was watching. Because just down in New Orleans, a door was opening. And the fit? Couldn't be more perfect. While Cleveland's coaching staff locked the doors, another franchise started quietly cracking a window open. And in New Orleans, that window wasn't just opening, it was wide open. Because as word of Sanders' dominance leaked past the Browns' facility walls, a very different organization was paying attention, and they liked what they saw. A lot. According to multiple insiders, the New Orleans Saints aren't just casually interested, they're actively positioning themselves to land SHEDEUR Sanders the minute Cleveland lets go. With veteran QB Derek Carr expected to be on his way out, a gap behind center has emerged, and Sanders is quickly becoming the guy they want to fill it. But this isn't just about replacing a quarterback. This is about identity. New Orleans isn't a franchise that plays it safe. They've never been about robotic systems or vanilla playbooks. They lean into swagger. Flash and fearlessness are baked into the culture, from Sean Payton and Drew Brees, to the electric chaos of the Superdome, to the viral bravado of players like Alvin Kamara and Tyrann Mathieu. They don't just tolerate confidence, they thrive on it. And that's why Sanders makes so much sense. This isn't about molding him into something new. It's about putting a quarterback into a city that already speaks his language on and off the field. Vertical concepts? Check. Play-action creativity? Check. An offense built to maximize mobility and field vision? Check. Sanders doesn't have to adapt. He already fits. And don't think for a second the Saints haven't done their homework. Insiders say their coaches have been dissecting Sanders' college film with obsessive detail, breaking down every rollout, every checkdown read, every moment under pressure. What they're seeing isn't just potential, it's performance polished by years of discipline and big moments. He's already shown he can run a high-level attack. Now it's about finding the right one, and in New Orleans, that system's been waiting for him. But this move wouldn't just solve a football problem, it would ignite a city that's starved for a long-term answer at QB. Since Brees left, it's been a carousel of short-term fill-ins. Jameis, Taysom, Winston, Dalton, Carr, none of them stuck. None of them made the Dome believe again. Sanders could change all of that the day he steps on the field. And quietly, the team's veterans seem to agree. Cameras have already caught players tweeting cryptic emojis, posting subtle stories, and dropping one-liners during interviews that hint at who they've got their eyes on. Kamara, Olave, even Michael Thomas voices that matter inside that locker room are starting to lean in. This isn't a rumor anymore. It's a coordinated shift from the coaches in back offices to veterans on the field. And Sanders? He's not chasing clout, he's chasing clarity. In New Orleans, there's no fog, no politics, just opportunity. Real structure, real planning, real leadership. There's no quarterback hierarchy built on draft status or preconceived narratives. If you can ball, you play. Simple. And that's exactly the kind of environment Sanders has been denied in Cleveland. But what happens when swagger meets structure? When talent finally gets a system designed for it instead of against it? That answer is waiting in a black and gold jersey. And the city's buzzing to find out. As the buzz around New Orleans surged, the situation in Cleveland kept unraveling. But to understand the magnitude of what the Browns are losing, you need to look closer. Because SHEDEUR Sanders hasn't just been better than Dillon Gabriel during training camp, he's been borderline unstoppable. We're not talking about a few flashy plays or one lucky stretch. We're talking about relentless, daily, undeniable output. A 75% completion rate across 9 practices. 0 interceptions. Not a single red zone turnover. Pressure drills? Flawless. 2-minute drills? Clinical. Throw after throw, read after read, he maintained surgical execution against top unit defenses. And yet, not one first-team rep. Now contrast that with Gabriel, the so-called future quarterback of the franchise. His numbers aren't just worse, they're alarming. Completion percentage hovering around 60%. Multiple picks in simulated game sessions. Passes sailing over receivers' heads. Soft throws in tight windows. And when the pocket collapses? Panic. Nothing about Gabriel's performance says ready. His footwork breaks down. Ball placement is erratic. But here's what stands out more than anything: the energy. Gabriel's leadership feels forced, manufactured, like he's trying to look the part, while Sanders naturally is the part. And the locker room sees it. NFL players aren't stupid. They watch what happens between the lines. Leadership? That's not something you can fake. It's earned in moments, quiet moments where toughness matters more than talent, and execution is the only currency that counts. Sanders showed up, took reps with the scout team, and practiced like every snap mattered. No ego, no complaining, just football. And because of that, he earned the respect of the guys around him. Bit by bit, the whispers started. Vet DBs started nodding when he made tight window throws. Receivers started privately saying who they wanted, throwing them the ball, and it wasn't Gabriel. Coaches might manipulate depth charts, but players know who's cooking and who's getting cooked. And make no mistake, the divide is growing. What started as quiet frustration is now open skepticism. Behind closed doors, players are asking the same questions fans are now starting to ask. What exactly does Gabriel do better? The answer? Nothing. Not right now. And yet, the coaching staff keeps pushing the same narrative. Gabriel's our guy. It's the kind of messaging that doesn't just create confusion, it breeds distrust. Stefanski's insistence on protecting the status quo is backfiring. Every time Sanders shines from the shadows and Gabriel stumbles in the spotlight, the cracks widen. Because if coaches won't recognize greatness when it's right in front of them, then what does that say about the system? What does that say about merit? And more important, what message does that send to the locker room? Keep your head down, work your tail off, outperform everyone, and still ride the bench because someone higher on the draft board came with a bigger promise? That's not football, that's theater. But SHEDEUR Sanders? He's not playing a role. He's already taken the lead without the title, without the promotion, and without the politics. He's earned everything Cleveland refused to give him. And now? The storm is breaking open. Because word has leaked. Sanders wants out. Players know it. Reporters know it. And inside those team meetings, the tension is unbearable. But New Orleans isn't just preparing for an arrival, they're preparing for a takeover. By the time SHEDEUR Sanders said the words, "I can't stay here anymore," the locker room wasn't surprised. They were relieved. Because for weeks, the tension inside the Browns facility hadn't just been simmering, it was boiling. Guys were walking around on edge, watching a quarterback ball out in practice, but get ignored like he didn't even exist. For the first time, players started asking themselves questions you never want floating around a team mid-camp. If this could happen to SHEDEUR, what does that say about the rest of us? And that's when it flipped. This story stopped being about one quarterback. It became something bigger. Respect, trust, leadership. Inside those walls, something changed. Players who were supposed to ride the fence started choosing sides, and privately, most were siding with Sanders. Veterans, rookies, even assistant coaches, everyone knew what the film said. Sanders was dominating team drills, stacking flawless practice days, reading defenses like he'd been in the system for 5 years. And in the film room, it was obvious who was in control when they were under center and who wasn't. But every time a reporter asked about the QB battle, Stefanski repeated the same corporate line, "We believe in Gabriel, it's all part of the process." That's when the locker room started to split. Guys who used to stay quiet began asking subtle questions in meetings. Leadership council players started speaking a little more bluntly in private. Sanders didn't even have to say a word. His performance had already said enough. And while Cleveland tried to lock the windows shut, the rest of the league pried them open. Behind the scenes, Sanders' agent was moving fast, hitting the phones, locking in interest, testing leverage. And teams listened. Because this wasn't just another backup quarterback asking for a trade. This was a future star, silenced by a system that refused to reward merit. And suddenly, the Browns had a massive, franchise-wide problem. Not just a quarterback issue, a credibility crisis. The front office was reportedly blindsided. Ownership? Furious. Stefanski? Now under the kind of heat that execs don't forget. Every rep Gabriel took moving forward wasn't about development, it was a referendum on the coach's judgment. Every missed throw became another bullet point for the case against the staff. And more than that, players were watching, some of them already looking at their own contracts, their own futures. Because when politics starts replacing performance, the message is clear. This isn't about who earns it anymore, it's about who they pre-selected. And that's where Cleveland lost the locker room. Sanders didn't storm out, didn't trash the franchise, didn't post a passive-aggressive message online. He just quietly let the truth get loud enough that no one could ignore it anymore. And the response? It wasn't silence, it was offers. Multiple teams, not just the Saints, reached out within 24 hours of his quote going viral. Washington, Vegas, and Minnesota reportedly joined New Orleans in expressing serious interest. The phones rang, the leverage shifted, and the Browns? Scrambling for damage control. But it's too late, because when a locker room finds out real competition doesn't actually exist, when they see your top performer getting sidelined for someone less talented, they stop believing in the plan. And when they stop believing, you've already lost. Now, it's not just Cleveland in crisis. It's New Orleans in motion. And suddenly, the conversation isn't about trade speculation, it's about timing. The public may still be debating it, but inside league offices, the message is already crystal clear. SHEDEUR Sanders is on the trade block. This isn't hypothetical, it's not rumor, it's reality, a rare convergence of leverage, timing, and star potential colliding at full speed. And now, the Browns have two choices, and both are ugly. Option 1, trade Sanders and admit they buried the best quarterback on their roster behind a political agenda. Option 2, keep him, despite a public, irreversible declaration that he's done, and risk turning the quarterback room into a mutiny. Either move exposes them, all because one player had the courage to speak the truth the entire locker room already knew. But here's where the pressure tightens because the clock is ticking. Preseason is already underway, and every day Sanders stays on the Browns roster. His value erodes not because he's not talented, but because everyone knows they have to move him. And in the NFL, desperation is blood in the water. But that works both ways. Because while Cleveland scrambles to frame this as no big deal, the Saints and several others are getting more aggressive by the day. Executives in New Orleans are lining up trade scenarios using future picks, cap relief mechanics, and even performance-based sweeteners that could increase the package depending on how quickly Sanders earns the starting job. In other words, they're planning to bet on him. That's the biggest shift in this entire story. Because Sanders isn't just a spare part anymore. He's become a uniquely valuable asset at the most important position in pro sports during a time when quarterback talent is thinning out across the league. Derek Carr is likely on the way out in New Orleans. Ryan Tannehill's time is up in Tennessee. Washington still doesn't have a long-term answer. The Raiders are retooling. Minnesota's reassessing life after Cousins. Hell, even Denver's been snooping, wondering whether Sanders could be the piece Peyton builds around next. Let's be clear, this isn't backroom buzz anymore. It's the NFL equivalent of a bidding war. And for a fifth-round pick? That's unheard of. But what makes this even more explosive is how different teams are valuing Sanders. To fans, he's a rookie. To front offices, he's a fully playable, system-ready quarterback who's already shown elite traits: poise, accuracy, football IQ, and maturity. And in private phone calls, GMs have made it known. If Cleveland doesn't want him, we'll gladly take him off their hands and build around him. And yet, the Browns are stuck. If they demand too much in a trade, teams will wait them out. If they settle for too little, the media and the locker room will bury them. Either way, the cost isn't just what they're losing, it's what they've already lost: credibility inside and out. This is more than a transactional move, it's an organizational test, and time is running out. With every passing hour, the systems are being installed elsewhere, playbooks are being taught. Rep counts are being swallowed by guys who don't have SHEDEUR's ceiling, and Cleveland is watching the most pro-ready quarterback on their roster just sit. But across the country, in New Orleans, the offensive staff is already drawing up plays, not if he shows up, but when. The buzz isn't behind the scenes anymore. It's on the field. It's in the huddle. It's in the film sessions. Sanders didn't just shake up Cleveland, he squeezed the entire league into a corner it didn't expect. A quarterback who refused to wait quietly, a coaching staff that refused to listen, and a trade that went from possible to inevitable. What started as a quarterback controversy has now triggered something much bigger, a shift in power no one in the NFL saw coming. Because this isn't just about SHEDEUR Sanders, this is about a generational movement, and Sanders just became its face. His open defiance of a broken hierarchy isn't some emotional outburst, it's calculated, controlled. A moment built not on frustration, but on decades of football politics finally meeting their match. And if you think this story sounds familiar, that's because it echoes some of the game's biggest turning points. Think about it. Eli Manning, 2004. Drafted by San Diego, but refused to play a down. He forced a trade to New York before ever taking the field. John Elway, 1983. Dismissed the Baltimore Colts outright and used baseball as leverage before eventually landing with the Broncos. Bo Jackson, 1986. Flat out refused to play for Tampa Bay after feeling disrespected during the draft process and walked away. Each move? Unconventional, uncomfortable, even controversial. But history judged them not for moments of rebellion, but for moments of clarity. They saw dysfunction early, challenged the system, and bet on themselves. They changed the shape of their careers by refusing to be silent. Now, Sanders joins that legacy. But here's where it's different. This time, it's all happening in real time. No misty press clippings or post-game editorials. No rewritten narratives years later. Today's quarterbacks? They have platforms. They have films. They have control. Something has changed. Social media, behind-the-scenes documentaries, throwing sessions posted to millions. The power isn't locked inside team buildings anymore. It's in the hands of the players. And guys like Sanders don't need to wait for a system to favor them. They can expose the dysfunction while it's still happening and rally public support in days, not years. Cleveland had a 5th rounder they thought they could bury. Instead, they accidentally gave him a megaphone and the whole league is listening. That's what makes this moment so dangerous for the old guard. NFL teams used to own the narrative now, they're reacting to it. And Sanders didn't just speak, he timed his message like a veteran politician. Controlled tone, measured words, no accusations. Just facts. I can't stay here anymore. How do you spin that? You don't. You scramble to explain it. You backpedal. You lose control. And as Cleveland loses every ounce of leverage by the hour, other quarterbacks and their agents are watching this unfold with surgical interest. Because now, every elite rookie stuck behind flawed politics has a blueprint. Quiet professionalism backed by consistent performance. Public truth released at maximum impact. Build the momentum yourself. Force the outcome on your terms. That's what Sanders has done. From overlooked to unavoidable, from optional to essential. He's not just a quarterback looking for a new home. He's the proof that the system isn't bulletproof anymore. And as other teams fall in line to make their pitches, one thing is clear. The NFL power structure has officially changed. Performance used to be second to politics. Now, performance has a voice. And it speaks with every pass SHEDEUR Sanders throws, every camera flash around his locker, every veteran whispering to a GM behind closed doors. This isn't a scandal. It's a signal. The revolution has already begun, and it's wearing jersey number 5. While Cleveland sinks under the weight of its own self-inflicted collapse, New Orleans is quietly building its future, and SHEDEUR Sanders is the centerpiece. There's no more pretending, no more debate. The Saints want him. Not as an experiment, not as a project, but as the guy, and they're already putting pieces in motion to make that a reality. Sources say the moment word got out about Sanders' public declaration, New Orleans' offensive staff shifted gears. They didn't just start dreaming, they started designing. Bootleg rollouts, quick hit play action, layered vertical shots that let Sanders read deep zones or take off when the pocket breaks, tailored blocking schemes that account for his mobility, weapons like Kamara, Chris Olave, and Rashid Shaheed just waiting to break open across the field. It's not theory anymore, it's installation. And around the building, the excitement is real. Veterans who once politely dodged QB talk are now leaning in. Kamara posted an emoji that got thousands of fans speculating. Olave dropped a quote about playing with the right type of fire. Michael Thomas threw a not-so-subtle jab about deserved chances. This isn't front office posturing, it's a player-led campaign. And Sanders? He doesn't need to prove he's ready. The film already proves it. He doesn't need to win over the room, guys are lining up to stand beside him. Because in New Orleans, respect isn't political, it's produced. And every time Sanders steps on the field, he produces like a quarterback built for prime time. But the beauty of this new chapter isn't just the fit, it's the philosophy. The Saints have always thrived when they lean into boldness, taking risks, trusting instincts, and betting on people who spark energy and execution. That's exactly who Sanders is. He's not trying to play the game the right way by old standards. He's rewriting the standard altogether. And in a league where so many young quarterbacks are forced to fit into outdated molds and play within limited vision, this is the first time the system is being built to meet him halfway. And that matters because Sanders represents more than one roster change. He symbolizes a directional shift. This isn't just a trade. It's not even just a promotion. It's a statement that the NFL is finally tipping toward performance over politics, authenticity over image, and boldness over stale hierarchy. And while Cleveland burns bridges trying to figure out how they lost their future without ever giving it a chance, New Orleans is already paving the road to theirs. Imagine it. A dome full of fans shouting as Sanders rolls out of the pocket for a 40-yard strike on 3rd and long. Kamara streaking across the middle in motion. Olave stretching the field deep. And at the center of it all, a quarterback with nothing to prove and everything to claim. Let's be real, this isn't just a football opportunity. It's a collision of purpose and momentum, a perfect alignment. The chemistry? Already building. The roster? Already championship ready. The leadership? Already preparing the crown. All that's left now is the deal. And when that paperwork clears, when SHEDEUR Sanders finally trades in orange and brown for black and gold, don't call it a comeback story. Call it a correction, because the league got it wrong once. And now? They're all lining up to get it right. This isn't just about SHEDEUR Sanders leaving a team. It's about a rising star taking back control and showing the entire league how power should really work in the NFL. A new era has begun. And New Orleans? They're already writing the first chapter.